Good morning, everyone. I think we'll get started. Welcome to today's workshop, Paving the Way with Esplanade. My name is Stephanie Larkin and I'm the National Sales Manager for Vegetation Management at Envu. Thank you all for taking the time to join us this morning to discuss the work we all do in managing vegetation along roadsides, fence lines and paved areas. This morning I'm joined by several speakers who will bring a wealth of knowledge and practical insight on both on Esplanade herbicide and vegetation management. As you all know, managing vegetation in transport corridors isn't just about safety or neat roadsides. It's for drivers, cyclists, pedestrians and workers. It's about maintaining sightlines, protecting infrastructure and reducing fire risks. But it's also about preserving the visual amenity of our public spaces, making sure they're not only functional, but also well kept and reflective of the standards our community expects. At the same time, we're all working with tighter resource constraints. Fewer hands on the ground and less funding to go around means we need to be smarter and more strategic in how we deliver our vegetation management programs. We're also being challenged, rightly, to consider how our work impacts the environment. That means minimising herbicide use, protecting biodiversity and making decisions that are sustainable in the long term. Today is about learning from each other, what's working, what's not, and how we can support one another in building more efficient, effective and environmentally responsible approaches to vegetation management. I encourage you to ask questions using the chat feature in Microsoft Teams to share your experiences and to make the most of the knowledge in this virtual room. So this morning I'll run through a little bit of background on who Envu is, and then we'll hear from Kira O'Brien, who's our Tech Services Manager here at Envu, and she'll give a technical overview of Esplanade. Geth Braddock from our US team will give a global perspective and the success they've had using indaziflam in the US and Esplanade. We'll have Yuri Kapro, who is also from Envu in Australia, Tech Services Manager, who's been working with indaziflam or Esplanade for many years now and some experience on different trials that he's done. And we've fortunate enough to be joined this morning by Tim Moody from the Murray River Council in southern New South Wales, who's going to give us a little bit of a case study on his experience with Esplanade and the impacts it's had on the vegetation program for the Murray River Council. Microsoft Teams has your audio disabled, but I encourage you to use the chat function in Teams as we go along. We'll cover the questions off at the end of the session. So Envu, who are we? Envu is a global environmental science company. We have about 1,000 staff across the globe. We were originally part of Bayer Crop Science as their Bayer Environmental Science business, and we now operate independently with a sharper focus on innovation and sustainability in the environmental science category. We have dedicated services in professional pest management, forestry, ornamentals, mosquito management, lawn and landscape, golf, range and pasture, and industrial vegetation management. And these last two are the segments that I look after here in Australia. So Envu has a legacy of leadership in the environmental science space. If you can read all the detail on this slide, you will see there's a large number of brands dating back as far as 1970 that have been part of our business through different mergers and acquisitions. So the history of Envu, whilst you may not have heard of us or we might only have been around for officially 3 years today, we do have a long history as part of other chemical companies across the globe. As of 3 years ago, Envu became a standalone business. It's owned by a private equity firm based in the US, and yeah, we have presence in many countries across the globe, 41 countries across the globe, and driven by innovation. We have 4 regional global R&D hubs across the country, across the globe even, and more than 200 registrations in over 100 countries. We're constantly publishing research papers, and trying to further the vegetation management and broader environmental science categories. So herbicide innovation over time, 60 years ago, there was, you'd recognise some of those active ingredients: simazine, 2,4-D, paraquat, picloram. There was, in that period from the 60s to the 80s, there seemed to be a new active ingredient or new chemistry coming to market every few years, and then it's rapidly slowed since really 1987 when chlorpyrrolid was released. It took till 2005 to see aminopyrrolid. We then saw the release in 2010 in the US initially of indaziflam, which is Esplanade. You'll learn more about that shortly. And then more recently, aminocyclopyrrochlor, which is our herbicide method, 2,4-D-SL. So not a lot of new technology coming to the market. It's very costly, and it's difficult to find new products that meet the new expectations of the community, and so delivering new new products has been difficult in this space. We're very fortunate to have 2 of the most recent herbicides in our portfolio. So next up, Kira O'Brien, who is our Tech Services Manager, is going to give you a technical overview of Esplanade, and then Kira will pass on to our next speakers. So thanks very much, and thanks, Kira.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much, Stephanie, for the introduction. So as you know, my name is Kira. I'm the Tech Services Manager for the Vegetation Management section or division of our business here in Australia. And I'll just be providing a little bit of an overview of Esplanade today. It won't be inclusive of every detail, but I will include some directions of other resources that you can access to delve into this product in a little bit more detail. You could go to the next slide, please, Stephanie. So Australia has more than 874,000 kilometres of roads, which means there's potentially up to 1.75 million kilometres of roadside vegetation in Australia that could serve as reservoirs for invasive weeds that impact both our natural and agricultural systems. Unmanaged vegetation poses a plethora of very serious challenges, and primarily those fall into 3 key areas. First and foremost, public safety is the primary driver for roadside vegetation management. So overgrown vegetation, as you know, it can obstruct sight lines, cover roads, road signage. It can also encroach into carriageways and also create hazards for both motorists and pedestrians. In terms of asset protection, unmanaged vegetation threatens the long-term function of our roadside infrastructure by compromising things like drainage, damaging pavements, and also increasing our management costs. And then finally, fire management is an increasing priority when it comes to roadside management. So it acts as a continuous and highly flammable fuel source, and this poses threats to both the road users, neighbouring properties, and also surrounding landscapes. And so by managing weeds strategically, we're not only maintaining safe and functional roads, but also protecting valuable assets and contributing to community safety on a more broad scale. So a little bit of an introduction in terms of what Esplanade is. So Esplanade is a pre-emergent herbicide that provides broad spectrum, long-lasting control on over 30 species of annual grasses and broadleaf weeds. It introduces an entirely new active into the Australian market called indaziflam, which is a group 29 herbicide. This group in particular inhibits cellulose biosynthesis, but I will go into this in a little bit more detail in the next slide. In terms of its application rate, on our label, the use rate for Esplanade is 150 mils per hectare, or alternatively 30 mils per 100 litres of water. And so this has a much lower use rate compared to some other older actives that are currently available on the market. You can use Esplanade in combination with a partner knockdown herbicide if weeds have germinated at the time of application, or if the weed spectrum that you're targeting is not covered by the use of Esplanade singularly on its own. Esplanade has been registered for various different use situations and use cases, which I'll go into a little bit more detail a couple of slides from now. But with it being a new active, it does have various formulation benefits. It's UV stable, it's non-volatile, and also has low odor. It demonstrates really superior environmental and performance characteristics compared to older chemistries, such as the likes of like simazine or sulfametron. It has a higher soil absorption coefficient, which is that KOC value, which means it binds more effectively to soil particles, and this therefore reduces the risk of leaching or movement within the soil profile. Indaziflam also has really low water solubility and minimal volatility, which further limits off-target movement, whilst its longer soil persistence ensures that we're getting extended residual control in areas where it's being applied. And so overall, Esplanade is setting a new standard in terms of bare ground weed control. So this here is the Herbicide Resistance Action Committee mode of action classification, which classifies all of the herbicides that are available into their modes of action. So according to this HRAC, indaziflam falls into a group 29 herbicide. Now there are other actives within group 29, even though this is a newer active in the Australian market. However, most of these other actives that are displayed on the slide here have very limited or fairly niche commercial use, and most of these are either unavailable in Australia or are used in very specific markets like turf and ornamentals on a more global scale. In terms of, I guess, what group 29s are or the mode of action that they have, they inhibit cellulose biosynthesis in the growing root and shoot tissues of germinated seedlings. So as you all know, cellulose is the primary structural component of plant cell walls, and without it, its cells are unable to elongate or maintain rigidity. And so because it targets these really early growth stages in the seedlings, Esplanade works almost exclusively before seedling emergence, once they germinate and start cellular division. So established plants which already have fairly functional cell walls are less affected, which means Esplanade has very little or virtually no post-emergent activity. But this is what makes it a really good fit as a pre-emergent herbicide. Esplanade as well does stand out in terms of its commercial availability, its broader utility and stronger fit for large-scale vegetation management in Australia. It represents a fairly unique and valuable option within this group 29 of herbicides, particularly when you compare it to older actives, which either have fairly restricted registrations, limited adoption, and most importantly, present herbicide resistance issues. So the continued reliance on things like glyphosate for roadside management, as you all know, has led to the development of weed populations that are resistant or tolerant to glyphosate. Some of these glyphosate resistant weeds that you'll be familiar with would be the likes of annual ryegrass, feathertop rhodes grass, and a couple of the different fleabanes. And this continued use and habitual use of glyphosate with little other management with newer chemistries such as indaziflam will end up leading roadsides being dominated by these species that have glyphosate resistance. And this here is just a bit of a photograph that I wanted to show you, I guess, to depict how Esplanade is working. So I believe this was some laboratory work that was done in the States on downy broom, which I think is a winter annual grass in the western parts of the US. This particular photograph is demonstrating the impact of indaziflam over different levels of concentrations. So as you can see, at lower concentrations, the root formation and the shoot formation is being progressively suppressed as increased concentration over time, versus at those lower concentrations on the left-hand side, we're having very little impact on root and shoot formation. So this just sort of reflects the mode of action of Esplanade, which is targeting cellular division in the root meristem and preventing seedling establishment overall. And then hopefully this video works, Stephanie, if you click on it. So this is just a time lapse of that laboratory germination trial that was conducted on downy broom, I believe, in the US. And it just shows an untreated section versus a section that's been treated with indaziflam. So as I touched on in one of those earlier slides, Esplanade combines efficacy, longevity, and environmental safety to provide a more balanced solution relative to some conventional alternatives that you may be using in your current roadside management projects. This is just a comparative table comparing indaziflam against various different variables to sulfametron and also hexazinone. We do have a more, I guess, extended or in-depth version of this table available on our resource center, which you'll see a QR code for a little bit later on in the presentation. But this is just to provide a brief overview in areas where indaziflam may be performing better compared to some of those older conventional actives. So both sulfametron and hexazinone have been integral components of IVM programs for many years, and they are familiar, widely used tools that most of you today probably have used at some stage. But there are some inherent limitations when compared closely with the likes of newer chemistries such as indaziflam. So although sulfametron, which is the one in the center of that table there, provides broad spectrum control, there is a high risk of resistance with these sorts of group 2 herbicides. So the mode of action for this herbicide group is essentially halting protein synthesis and cellular division by inhibiting an enzyme called ALS. Another thing as well with sulfametron is that it has low soil binding capacity and also medium-term persistence as well. Then in terms of hexazinone, similarly, it does have a broad spectrum of control as a group 5 herbicide. However, this chemical is prone very much to leaching. It doesn't bind very strongly to the soil profile, and this raises significant environmental concerns, and it's therefore not appropriate in every use situation in IVM management. It's also associated with fairly high costs when you take into consideration the need for repeated application, as you'll see there on those lower 2 rows of the table. In contrast, indaziflam has no known resistance, unlike some of those conventional chemistries that are in group 2, 5, or even 6. It has high soil binding properties as indicated by its KOC value, and also fairly low solubility. And this lowers the risk of off-target movement, as I was mentioning in an earlier slide, and also offers long-term residual control, minimizing the need or the frequency for retreatment and overall management management costs. Importantly, indaziflam is effective at very low use rates compared to some of these other traditional chemistries, which translates into a reduced environmental burden. As you can see there, its active ingredient per hectare is 75 grams per hectare, or active ingredient per 100 mils translates to about 15 grams per 100 litres of water. And so although the purchase price initially may seem higher relative to the likes of sulfametron or hexazinone, its extremely low application rate in combination with the extended residual results that we see significantly lower the cost both on a per hectare basis and also per annum basis as well. So just in terms of the situations in which we have registration for with indaziflam, this table just provides a little bit of a summary along with the registered weeds and application rates. It's just intended as a sort of brief reference guide. If you want to have a look at a more in-depth version of our label, you can scan the QR code on the screen and it will take you to our website there. But in terms of what we have registration for, non-crop areas around buildings, commercial and industrial areas for maintenance of bare ground. So this includes things like rights of ways, railways, roadsides, guideposts, power lines, substations, airports, and fence lines. Also for grassed areas on roadsides, airports, utility rights of way, and medium and centre strips. We also have registration for rehabilitation and restoration of desirable vegetation in natural and non-crop areas. We do also have registration in forestry situations, so both pre-plant and post-plant, but it's really important that you refer to the label for the safe, legal and effective use of the product in these situations. In terms of pre-plant application, we have registration for about 5 or 6 different species, and then for post-plant, it's just on radiator pine, and both of those are at an application rate of 150 mils per hectare. So then this table also just provides a summary of the weed species currently registered on the Esplanade label, which highlights the breadth of control that is offered. But just remember that this obviously isn't a substitute for the full label, and you can access that through the QR code that was on the previous slide there. You'll see we have over 30 both broadleaf species and also grass species registered on the Esplanade label. Has a similar sort of spectrum compared to the likes of hexazinone and also sulfametron, which we covered on a previous slide. And just to give you a little bit of an overview of what your current management program may look like and how that could be transformed to include Esplanade as a pre-emergent solution. So along the centre there, we obviously have one annual year, January through December, which is broken down into the seasons. Along the bottom is what your typical current management plan may look like, where you're doing about 3 to 6 knockdown sprays per year. So for example, if you were to use glyphosate in this situation, it works out to be about $33 per kilometre of roadside. So if you were to do that, let's say 3 times a year, that works out to be about $99 per kilometre, and that would be for about a 1 metre wide strip. And then on top of that, in conjunction to those knockdown sprays, you would also have to do mowing between 2 to 3 times a year. And that obviously has a high cost associated as well in terms of labour and contracted work that you would need for that. Versus if you compare along the top, what your management plan could look like with Esplanade. One strategically timed spray can give up to 8 months of cover if you have limited winter growth. You may not need another spray unless high rainfall has been recorded in your region, but you can spray up to 2 times per year in accordance with our label, and that's at the use rate of 150 mils per hectare. Depending on whether you've used a knockdown or if you're trying to achieve bare ground, you may choose to mow perennial plant growth between those Esplanade treatments. You can also combine, as I said, Esplanade with a knockdown herbicide, which can include the likes of glyphosate. It can also include one of our products that's also in our IVM portfolio called Method 240SL, which you can find more information on our website. So ultimately what this graphic is showing that currently what you might be doing, which is between 3 to 6 annual sprays with a knockdown and 2 to 3 times mowing per year, you can reduce that down to 1 to 2 sprays with glyphosate in combination with a knockdown, which is significantly less, as I mentioned, chemical burden onto the environment and also less labor associated with this work as well. So it's really streamlining your management program. So just a couple of notes to take in terms of the effective application of herbicides. So it's important that you are getting even coverage and also that you're calibrating your equipment properly. And that probably it would be a key factor with most herbicides that you're using in your program. As I said, you can tank mix with an effective knockdown herbicide. High levels of vegetation or cover can prevent Esplanade from reaching the soil and resulting in poor performance. So if you do have quite a lot of pre-existing vegetation, it may be worthwhile to go in with a knockdown treatment first and then follow up with Esplanade or include a knockdown in with your Esplanade treatment. The product also does need to be activated by rainfall. So you need approximately about 6 millimeters of rainfall prior to weed germination for Esplanade to be the most effective control. I think Yuri, who'll be speaking a little bit later on in this presentation, he says even if you have a couple of mornings of really good dew, that would be a sufficient amount of moisture in order to activate Esplanade within the soil profile. Esplanade, as I said, is not susceptible to photodegradation. It's fairly UV stable, so it will remain on the soil surface for several weeks prior to rainfall, so you don't have to be too concerned on that front either. So this slide is just highlighting our Esplanade Online Resource Center, which is a really invaluable tool for both resellers and end users as well. So it provides easy access to a wide range of resources that we have available on Esplanade. This obviously includes things like our product brochures and our technical notes, but also video content. So we do have videos that show some of our trial results and also customer testimonials. As I mentioned, we do have comparative data available as well in like a tabular format where you can compare Esplanade to some other key actives that are available in this space. We do also have a cost calculator where you can compare the cost of Esplanade to other actives as well, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail in a moment. And we also offer a product guarantee of up to 6 months, and you can find more information about that on our online resource center, as well as any information pertaining to our stewardship as well. So if you just scan the QR code that was on the previous slide, it can take you to that resource center. This is the roadside and fence line calculator that I mentioned in the previous slide. It also is also a tool that's widely available on our website if you didn't scan that resource center QR code. This tool has been designed to assist resellers in better positioning Esplanade relative to some conventional herbicide programs, and also to enable both councils and other land managers to assess and plan the most cost-efficient and effective deployment of Esplanade in roadside management initiatives. So although the initial cost of Esplanade may appear expensive, its economic value is actually best understood and demonstrated when considered on a per kilometre treatment basis. So unlike conventional herbicides such as glyphosate, which I think is the one that's referenced in this particular cost calculator, this typically requires repeated applications to achieve and maintain control, whereas Esplanade is providing extended residual activity, as I said, between 6 to 8 months typically is what we see. And so this prolonged efficacy reduces the frequency of follow-up interventions and thereby decreasing the overall chemical and labor inputs whilst enhancing operational efficiency. So if you have a look on the left-hand side there, that just quantifies what the cost of Esplanade may look like on your first year of application. So this would incorporate a knockdown with glyphosate, and that would work out to be roughly $44.70 per kilometre for the whole year. And that kilometre would be about a 1 metre strip of the roadside. Then that middle table there shows what your cost might look like on the second year when you no longer need to incorporate a knockdown treatment. That works out to be roughly about $41.85 per kilometre per year. And then to the right-hand side there is if you were doing repeated applications of glyphosate only. As I said, that works out to be roughly about $99 a year per kilometre, and that's on the basis that each treatment would cost around $33 per kilometre, and you'd need to be doing that anywhere between 3 to 6 times a year. So although the initial cost of glyphosate, when you're buying a drum of it, may look cheaper, overall the total for the year ends up being considerably more expensive than using the likes of Esplanade. And you can also access, as I said, that cost calculator through the website, and you can update some of those values to include your specific labor costs or glyphosate costs, so that you can have a more accurate comparison between the two. We do also have a short stewardship module that is available for resellers, councils, landholders, and contractors, and this is to ensure both the safe, legal, and effective use of Esplanade. It does cover quite a few different principles in relation to things like situation for use, situations where it's not approved or supported, any PPE that's required, application constraints, what constitutes effective application, spray zones, how to avoid runoff, and those sorts of factors. It is part of Envu's commitment to responsible stewardship and sustainable weed management, and you do get a certificate upon completion of this module as well. It'll take roughly between 15 to 20 minutes depending on if you're taking notes, so I highly recommend that if you are interested in the product or you plan to use it, that you complete this stewardship module so that you better understand the safe and legal use of the product itself. And I think that's everything that I wanted to touch base on this morning. As I mentioned, this is really only surface level sort of summary of Esplanade with the limited time that I had. You can refer to that resource center that I referenced if you wanted some more in-depth information about Esplanade, or alternatively, I believe all of our contact details will be posted at the end of the presentation, and you can reach out to any one of us, including myself, for more detailed technical support or advice on the product.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. It's up to me.
It sure is. Thanks, Geth. Thanks, Kira.
Very good. I'm going to echo a lot of the things that she said in my presentation. So you can, I'll try to keep you on pace with telling you to change slides. But I've had the opportunity to come to Australia and New Zealand several times. So it was a wonderful experience. Y'all have a beautiful country, but you also have lots of challenges, just like we do in the United States with non-native plants, with lack of people to do things, and then just challenges in general of managing these sites. So I wanted to show a couple of pictures just from some of the images and the trips that I'd made down there. This is a good example. It's got a roadway, it's got a distribution power line, it's got a fence line. All of these areas are good fits for both Esplanade and Method. And I'm going to include Method in this presentation because it is a good combination companion herbicide to Esplanade when you're going out there and trying to manage these sites. So, just I guess a couple of main things that I would like to offer to start with is that, there's no one size, one treatment fits all situation. I still like to look at sites. I still like to talk to people who are managing these sites. And you can learn a lot about that and help them think about things in a long term, think about things in a proactive way. And then I try to help remind people to, that to follow God's design of a natural setting, whether it's a forest or whether it's a rangeland. And all of these industrial sites that we get to manage, prior to there being a road there, prior to a railroad track or a power line, that was a rangeland or a pasture or a forest before. And it's always trying to move back in that direction. And the more we can help release those native plants, those low growing plants that are compatible with the sites, the easier our life is going to be in the long term. And one of the good things about Esplanade is it is a very good pre-emerge product, and it addresses a lot of these weeds prior to them germinating or emerging and producing another crop of seeds. And it also starts to address the weed seed bank that's there in the soil. And it looks at things from a proactive standpoint versus a reactive standpoint. Many of the sites in the US have been mow and post-emerge spray, and it's just done that over and over. And eventually you just spread more weeds and more seeds and things like that up and down the road by doing mechanical only. So go to the next slide, Stephanie. Another example of a cable barrier, I believe this was in Australia too. We call them cable barriers in the United States, and I apologize for the terminology. It's been probably about 6 years since I've been down there, and I forgot some of the terminology. But this is a site where most likely it's going to be done mechanically with string trimmers, what we call weed eaters in the U.S. But very, very expensive to do it that way mechanically. One of the most expensive management acres that we do in the United States is a cable barrier guardrail. And if you do it mechanically, it's very expensive. So one of the good fits for Esplanade here is you're trying to promote the desired turf. You're controlling weeds before they germinate and produce another crop of weeds, which helps in the long term. And when many of these sites, herbicides are typically about a third of the application cost. The majority of it is with labor and equipment and overheads and those kind of things. And one of the good things about Esplanade is it's being proactive is that it helps reduce the frequency that you have to go back out there, which addresses the most expensive part of that operation. So the combination of herbicides, pre-emerge and post-emerge, plus mechanical treatments, is the best way to manage these areas long term. Next slide, Stephanie. This is a rail yard, I believe, outside Sydney. And you can see this is one of those sites that you just have to have total vegetation control. But I also wanted to point out some of the bare dirt areas in these sites. If the aggregate has been pressed down over time or lost over time, is washed off site, managing bare dirt and trying to keep that weed free is a very challenging situation to do. Even though Esplanade is very stable, if that soil tends to move a little bit, it'll move off and allows the seeds to germinate because that indaziflam has moved a little out of those bare dirt areas. And I'll show a slide of that later from one of the places in the United States. All right, Stephanie. I believe this was actually in New Zealand, but it's leads me into my topic about method and utility brush and focusing on long-term management. But you can see a little rock area, a slope there that might be a good fit for indaziflam and Esplanade and maintaining those weed-free. So let's start off with talking about some of the utility brush, because at the end, when we start talking about roadsides and bare ground, the combination of method with Esplanade is going to be one of those good solutions that you can go out there to manage those industrial sites. Okay. So one of the things we always like to cover in the United States is about herbicide product safety and how much goes into getting a product to be able to be used in the United States on these industrial sites. So the registration process is usually about 9 years to get something to the market. And so we typically don't say one product is safer than another, one product is less toxic than the other. Anything that has come through the registration process is safe for use. When we use it according to the label directions, on the right site, wearing our PPE at the right rates and all that. So it's a good reminder when you do have those discussions sometimes with the public who is against using herbicides or any other form of management. Okay. So I mentioned earlier that, industrial sites is either still a forest or a rangeland. It just has an industrial component tied to it. So I try to look at things from a land management standpoint, which starts off with a site assessment. What species are present there? What has been historically done there? Then you look at what habitat you're trying to release, and also what species you're trying to control. And identifying species is a big part of making sure when we write a prescription that we're recommending products that help maintain those sites based on the species that are present there. Then we do some kind of management plan through specific prescriptions. And since I'm a forester, I usually think in those terms, and at a minimum, I'm looking at a 10-year management plan. And I want to lay out what's going to be done mechanically, what's going to be done with herbicides, and what's going to be the result through biological control if we're doing our job properly, and then revisit that at the end of the 10-year period. I also want to make sure I'm partnering with professional people. We call it the opposite of Excel spreadsheet management in the US, where somebody looks at a spreadsheet with a single price, looks at a number, and goes with the lowest number at one point in time. And Esplanade is part of a bigger program, looks at the cost over a period of time, which managing proactively is going to benefit you long term. And then also be prepared and communicate with the public on getting the work done, getting people out there to do it. So we do some of the most environmentally friendly management out there, and it's good to be able to communicate that when we have the opportunity with the public. Okay, Stephanie. Next slide. If it's not frozen. Here's a good example of a distribution right away in the United States. And I live in the southern part of the US, much like the top of Australia, lots of rainfall, lots of growing season, lots of warm temperatures. And this would be a site where we would not use herbicides at all here. We have to do some reclamation in these situations. So it's brings you back to that earlier comment where you just have to look at the site and talk to the customer and see what they've been doing. And it may take several years to get this to the point where you can use herbicides to control the brush. You can go to the next slide. Typically, the selective treatments in the United States on utility brush with method is done with one of these type of handguns. So it's a 2-trigger system, 2-tip sprayer nozzles. It's got a straight stream to shoot larger brush and a flat fan nozzle to shoot smaller brush, and the flat fan is turned vertical. So we're typically doing very low rates of herbicides, very low rates of the solution altogether. And then you move that image that was before this, that's 6,000 to 10,000 stems per acre, into the 100 stems per acre, which would look like natural plant succession in a forest setting. Okay, you can go to the next one. I believe this is a video if you want to click it as well, if it plays. If it doesn't, we won't worry about it. This is the results. What I like to say, it's 15-year results. So it's gone from that high stem density site to a lower stem density site. You release these native plants that are typically found in the understory of the forest ecosystem that was here before. This is typically what you would see from a natural fire disturbance. So one of the good things with herbicides you can do is mimic that fire disturbance and release those native plants to help compete with the non-native species that are trying to dominate that site. And then that gives you the ability to have biological control, which reduces your cost to manage that site over time. Okay, and go to the next one. Some similar situation on a distribution right away. That was a transmission right away. This is the actual 30-year results from using selective herbicides, very, very limited mowing, promoted native plant restoration, same kind of situation, different state, but same kind of forest type that was here before, and we're releasing those plants. Okay. So we talk about roadways in Esplanade in the southern United States. This is a good example. Instead of a cable barrier, this is a guardrail. This is actually Bermuda grass in the fall. We applied Esplanade Plus method from a proactive standpoint to try to be able to not have to maintain these mechanically the following year. So this is Alabama Department of Transportation, one of the state's DOTs where I am, and they would mow typically 4 times a year mechanically and do 2 to 3 to 4 post-emerge applications. And some of those applications were strictly just for the guardrail management. So this is a site that you haven't had to do any kind of guardrail management. You're maintaining that barrier there. In addition, I don't know if you've paid attention to people using string trimmers on the side of the roads. They're always cutting down to the bare dirt. And so when you have bare dirt, then you have a place for weed seeds to come and take over and start growing again. So managing to promote desired vegetation under those guardrails helps provide that biological competition for things that you don't want. Next slide. Same Alabama Department of Transportation. This is a district. This has not been mowed for 10 months. And this is within an area with lots of rainfall, lots of good growing. But by being proactive, by taking control of the seed bank that's there with Esplanade in the fall, it just helps that limit the weed seed spread when you do have to go out there and mow. You're not spreading it up and down the roadways. Okay, next slide. This is what we like to call our poster child, where we've used Esplanade, where we started using Esplanade with this Department of Transportation. So 70 plus inches or 178 centimeters of rainfall per year. This actual roadside had not been mowed in 2.5 years. So it started out with Esplanade in the fall. So for us, that's the opposite of you. So, but it performs best, and you really can't be too early with Esplanade out there. And it has a post-emerge with it, and the combination of the two followed by a couple other products helps do plant growth regulation and reduce the mowing over time. So it's just a good program and good results that you can demonstrate what can be done by being proactive with Esplanade. All right, Stephanie. All right, bare ground in Esplanade. She showed, Kiara showed the slide of how much product was used with older chemistry. We've been using Esplanade in the United States since about 2012, and it started out on railroad tracks. And it has that unique mode of action that helps manage a lot of resistant weeds. And this is one that was resistant to both glyphosate, both to other group 2 herbicides like sulfametron that she mentioned, metsulfuron, but this is pigweed amaranthus. And we were trying to manage this weed for this customer, and we were using Esplanade here, but we finally figured out that there was not enough aggregate to hold the Esplanade on site. This is a bone meal plant that had a lot of bone meal that was blowing off from the trucks and off of the road. And was filling in these gaps between these tracks, and we weren't able to control it. So if you remember that slide earlier from Sydney with those bare dirt areas on the railroad tracks, that's something to help manage the customer expectations. Even if you are doing everything with the right rates, the right chemistry, the right timing, there's still some environmental situations out there that pose challenges for us in managing these sites. You can see the railroad track in the background with good aggregate and the difference between the two sites, even though they're right next to each other. All right, next slide. And so we decided that let's go put some extra additional aggregate there and see if we get the performance out of Esplanade that we should be getting. And you'll see that little bright gray square there with adequate amount of aggregate. And you'll see that the amaranthus did not germinate and grow, so there was no need to do it for that second treatment. And that's one of the big things that we position Esplanade in combination with other chemistries to be able to limit the time a crew has to go to a site. Literally, some of our applicators have basically used the same amount of people and equipment to double the amount of acres or hectares that they manage and are responsible for. So it's been very, very beneficial to us to have Esplanade as part of our portfolio to help people manage these industrial sites. Does that one make sense? Hopefully it does. So she mentioned this earlier too, as well, the resistance group. And you'll see group 29 down there at the bottom, which is Esplanade, and the amount of known resistant weeds by site of action is 4, which is one of the lowest. And if you use the combination of a bunch of these products, and I'm not sure of all the products that are available in Australia, but going out with multiple modes of action at the same point, the same time, is a very good way to manage resistance. All right, Stephanie. So we get this debate a lot in the United States. Is it better to rotate chemistry from year to year, or is it better to tank mix multiple modes of action at one point in time and apply them at that time? So which strategy is less likely to develop resistance? And the answer is tank mixing more than 2 or more modes of action. All right, next slide. And it's actually 83 times less likely to occur if you mix multiple modes of action that are effective on the same weed species. And you can see in this graph, if you had no strategy, repeat single site of action, you can see how fast the resistant population goes up. Rotation of 2 effective sites of action, so rotating, changing mixes year over year versus tank mixing multiple modes of action at the same point of time. And we typically do 3 or 4 herbicides on our bare ground treatments at one point in time. And this is a very good publication. I put that up there. It's in small print by Dr. Derek Sebastian and Dr. Shannon Clark, both work for Envu in the US. And I can provide that, Stephanie, to y'all if you would like it. It's a good publication, technical publication. It looks about 30 or 40 bare ground mixes and compares them from an efficacy standpoint, from a time of application versus fall versus spring. It's just a good resource, and probably a lot of those chemistries are available in Australia just like they are in the US. All right, next slide. So just in summary, it's no different in the United States than it is in Australia, and how important it is to work with the right people. And that's one good thing about working at Envu. We have very good technical people. We have salespeople like myself that are always available to help these to manage these sites. Don't forget to consider the site where you are and the species you're dealing with, and really, really consider managing proactively with both pre and post emerge. And that's why it's so important to incorporate Esplanade into your programs, because it does so much of the work for you before you ever see weeds, which is really, really good. And then manage for the long term with multiple modes of action applied at the same time. And that's going to give you the best long-term results for what you're trying to accomplish out there. So last slide, that's my contact information. Thank you very much for letting me participate.
Thanks very much, Geth. Really appreciate you joining us all the way from the States. So next up, we have our Tech Services Manager, Yuri Carpro, who's going to share some of the trial work that he's been doing over the years with Esplanade. Thanks, Yuri.
Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, Girth. Yeah, we've done a lot of, you could go on the next slide, Steph. We've done a lot of trials over the years to get the registration, the label that we've currently got. And as per with all these types of new products, the trial program keeps going as we look to expand the label and make it fit into how people want to use the product. So you can see there's been a lot of trials done in a lot of different situations, and I just want to pick out a couple of these and just give you a couple of examples of the things we've done in the short time that we've got. Thanks, Stephanie. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was roadsides. Girth sort of talked about this, so I just wanted to give you an Australian perspective. So we got approached to do some work down in the ACT by the ACT government to look at how Esplanade might fit into their roadside spraying programs. Their current programs involved the use of simazine plus glyphosate. So we run a fairly large scale trial comparing that program that they're currently using with Esplanade as the residual and glyphosate as the knockdown. And this was quite a way back in July 2019, the applications were made. So in the middle of winter, and you can see the list of species there that were present on the site. Thanks, Stephanie. Next slide. Not moving. There we go. So yeah, it was very evident that Esplanade was, lasting much longer and giving much more weed control than their current program. You can see this is February 2020. This photo taken, so about 7 months up after application. So these were just sprayed around and underneath the guardrails on those arterial roads in Canberra. So it was very evident that Esplanade was, performing much better and would last much longer. And certainly down in that climate, that temperate climate down south, that's proven to be the case over the years. So this has sort of become a program down there. Thanks, Stephanie. And some more roadside work that I did in southern New South Wales. And you can see the top part of the photograph was treated with Roundup and Esplanade. The bottom half was only treated with Roundup. And then 5 months later, there was quite a germination once we got some rainfall of a whole range of mainly annual grass species. So again, proving that long-term control, and that lasted well past 8 months. Thanks, Stephanie. And the other situation with roadsides, of course, is all that infrastructure that we've got adjoining the roads. So did a guidepost trial. So we sprayed 20 or 30 guideposts with different treatments, and this is just 2 of those treatments. You can see after 6 months, the guideposts that were only sprayed with Roundup, which is a standard practice in the council area where this trial was done, we were getting quite a lot of germination of a range of especially dicot species. You can see some fleabane and oxalis and a few things there. Compared with where the Roundup was combined with Esplanade at 6 months, we were still totally weed free. So again, performing really well. Moving on to the railways, we've done a whole range of railway work from sort of far north Queensland down south and then across to Western Australia. So this is just a bit of a case study on a client who's been using Esplanade now for a number of years. So the site here, and if you look at those trees in the background, the photos are from the same site. So the photo on the left taken in June 2023, before they started using Esplanade. The photo on the right taken 2 years later. So annual applications of Esplanade plus knockdown herbicides has resulted that in no annual ryegrass presence on the site, which is one of those major weeds that we see, especially in agricultural cropping areas. And one of the issues with annual ryegrass is that we now have a lot of to post-emergent herbicides. They're not proving to be, like Esplanade, become very important. So we looked at the activity of Esplanade on some resistant weed species. If you go on the next slide, thanks. So we got Plant Science Consulting, who are based at the University of Adelaide, who have a collection of seed, because they do routine testing for the agricultural industry on herbicide resistance. So they have quite a collection of seed of various plants which have got resistance, proven resistance. So we used ryegrass, which had resistance to 3 different modes of action, sort of emphasising what I said before about the problems with control of annual ryegrass. So group 1, which is your FOPs and DIMs, group 2, those ALS inhibitors, the sulfonyl ureas that Kiara talked about, and then group 9, which is glyphosate. In the middle, we've got fleabane, resistant to glyphosate, and on the right, feathertop rose grass, resistant to glyphosate again. So the 3 pots in each one of those photos hasn't been treated, and you can see the germination of the weeds, and the ones on the right were treated after the seed were sown with Esplanade. So it's quite effective in the controlling of those biotypes which have got herbicide resistance. Thanks, Stephanie. Just wanted to talk a little bit about a situation we often see in council type of situations, which is weed control in hard surfaces, whether that be, bicycle paths like this, where we've got cracks and crevices, or roundabouts, or other paving type of situations. So we did some trial work again in the ACT. Thanks, Stephanie. Where they were looking at different programs to control the weeds in those types of situations. So it was a trial that was done over 12 months with a range of treatments. The first one being a hot water treatment, second one glyphosate, then glyphosate plus simazine, which is their sort of standard current program, and then the final one, glyphosate plus Esplanade. And applications were made when certain thresholds were reached in terms of weed cover, which resulted in that 12-month period that there was 3 applications needed of the hot water treatment, 2 of the glyphosate, 2 of the glyphosate plus simazine, and only 1 of the glyphosate plus Esplanade. And then at the end of 12 months, the actual weed cover that was present was measured, and you can see there sort of between 9 and 13% weed cover in those first 3 treatments, whereas Esplanade was still, very, very low weed cover, 0.5%. And there's some photographs on the next slide. Yep, so in those photographs on the left there, you can see hot water treatment in the top left corner, glyphosate on the right. Then bottom left is glyphosate plus simazine and glyphosate plus Esplanade there. So this paved area and the photograph on the right-hand side was split into, the treatments was split on the left-hand side of that path is glyphosate plus simazine. On the right-hand side was glyphosate plus Esplanade. So these type of crack crevice treatments where Esplanade, there's enough soil in those areas to hold the Esplanade, we get quite long weed control without having to go back and retreat, which is obviously a big saving on labour and chemical costs. Thanks, Stephanie. So we've done quite a bit of rail work. There is a video here, but I don't think we've got time to watch the whole video, so you can catch that video on our website. It's a case study that was done up in Queensland, where they were looking to change their herbicide programs to something that was more effective. So yeah, Esplanade has proven to be, given them much longer control, much better control of the weeds, which then, as I said before, translates into time and labour cost savings. So if you want to catch that, you can catch that video on our website. I think we can press on. Yeah, and the final case study, just wanted to highlight here, is a fence line. We've done fence line work in urban situations, in rural situations, there's been quite a bit of fence line work. This was at Melbourne Airport, where maintaining that fence line is hugely important for the safety of the airport. You certainly don't want anyone getting access into the airport, whether it be people or animals getting through that fence line. So they must have sight of the bottom of the fence to make sure that there's no places where incursions can happen. So the current program was with knockdown herbicides like glyphosate and a product called Trimac, and we tried that against glyphosate plus Esplanade, and you can see there over the time of again about 7 months, the weed control provided by the Esplanade glyphosate treatment was much superior and maintained that fence line bare for that period. And I think that might be the end of me, Stephanie. Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Yuri. Appreciate that. Next up, we have Tim Moody, who is our superintendent from the Murray River Council in southern New South Wales. Tim is just going to give us a little bit of an overview about his region and his experience with Esplanade and vegetation management. Tim. Might be on mute, Tim. Where's he gone?
Hello.
There you are.
Sorry.
Oh, good.
That's all right. Thanks everyone for having me along. And yeah, sorry I don't have too many photos. I think I've only just got some photos to look at here and a bit of me talking. So, yeah, I'm the Superintendent of Parks and Biosecurity here at Murray River Council. We're in southern New South Wales, up against the Victorian border with the Murray River. So quite a nice area, if I say so myself. We've got 11,000 square kilometres of area within this council, with 7 towns and about 8 or 9 villages in amongst there as well. So quite a large area to look after, lots of travel between towns and that. My parks and gardens role obviously is within town. It's all the parks, open space, sports fields and that. And then I've also got the biosecurity side, which is priority weed control and vegetation management for our council owned property, such as the roadsides, the bike paths, those public spaces too that are quite often used. I started the council in 2019. When I come, there was no real planned vegetation management through our council. We were very reactive, just using contractors, just reactive in terms of when it rains, high air grows, quick call a contractor and see when he can come and do it, which obviously by then the weeds were 3 foot tall, covering the guideposts, and it led to lots of complaints and just poor use of assets and funding, because chemicals go up and down and are quite costly over time. So I started, and as well as spraying, I was probably spraying around 2 to 3 times reactive a year, and then also adding that to 1 or 2 times of slashing as well. So just to keeping the vegetation under control, just on along the roadsides and around our laneways and bike tracks, and that was costing council quite a bit of money and in wages and machinery and wear and tear as well. So I come in and I looked at it and I tried to put in, I was able to put in a proactive program in place to try and get on top of this, and I actually brought all this the weed control in-house. So I was able to put a team together of biosecurity staff members with their job doing priority weeds, but also roadside and urban weed control, keeping these areas free and clean for the public to use. In 2020, I think, I was introduced to Esplanade, And I must admit, I was a little bit skeptical at the time. Like, here's this magical product that's going to solve my issues, and at only 150 mil per hectare, just off past experience, like atrazine, simazines, all that, like Diron, like, you know, you go on kilos and litres of per hectare just to get a few months control. And I got told 150 mil would get that up around that 8-9 months control easy. But so I started off small, just a bit like all these trials and that, and I quickly realised, it actually does work. We just had so much success. We started on our major highway, which is the Cobb Highway, just a major thoroughfare state road through our area that has lots of road trains and that, and that's the photos you're actually looking at here. So when I come in, that bottom right photo, that guidepost there, that was 3 foot of grass and vegetation all the way to the edge of the seal there. It presented a lot of issues because being a major thoroughfare, there's lots of traffic. It's actually a high risk road in terms of us working on it. Like, we have to apply to Transport New South Wales to get permission to get on there because they own the road, but we're responsible for maintaining it. So they make us jump through lots of hoops and to control it. But yeah, so if we started there with Esplanade and just started on the program to trial that one first, and also the bike tracks within town. And I was just, within the first 12 months, I was just so surprised. Here I was able to reduce all that vegetation back to, you can see pretty much that's where the spray line is quite wide. I aim for 3 metres, 3 to 4, 3.5 metres, just enough for a car to get off the side of the road, park safely. You know, a kid might want to go to the toilet, or you got a flat tyre, or you got an overheating wheel bearing. Overheating wheel bearings cause quite a few fires in our area. So being able to pull off the road safely and that just reduce that risk is just having that bit of spare space just was so beneficial to all users and workers, and that is combined. Sorry, I'll just go through my note. So yeah, some of the benefits of the Esplanade. So we started on the Cobb Highway. The other one was, I mentioned, was the bike tracks and our laneways. Every year we would just get smashed over this time of year with complaints, cow trop, so catheads, bindi eye, 3/4 jacks, whatever you want to call it, but flat out bike tyres, and also snakes. We got quite get a lot of snakes up in our area. So having that little bit of a clear edge of next to our bike tracks also and laneways around town was just able to, started to use Esplanade, and our complaints just dropped right off. I'm talking like we'll run a bindi eye program or a cathead program where we're encouraging the people to remove them all and they win money prizes. That's because we're talking 300 complaints a year just about catheads on our bike tracks and that. Since we started using Esplanade over last year, I just actually went and looked back while I was here. We received 3 complaints about that bindi eyes in our townships. So it's pretty much just cut it all out just by having this planned program using the right chemical. And those complaints actually for nature strips that council don't manage, so actually other people who didn't do it. So yeah, having it's been really, really good for us. So the other benefit is we aim to spray in spring is our first spray, so September. It's also the peak growing season, obviously, and it's also a windiest month of the year. So we got over 1,000 k's of sealed road we spray every year, plus all around these townships, parks and gardens, laneways, bike tracks and that, and also our water and sewer and transfer waste facilities. So it was a lot of area to try and spray within a very short window before the weeds were able to get away. since we use Esplanade, it's actually given us more flexibility because the weed vegetation matter is just not there. I believe these photos were only taken about a month ago or the start of spring, Stephanie. So you can see normally that would be the weeds on the side of the road there would be all the way to the seal, and we're rushing trying to get that back under control. Now, we still haven't sprayed it as yet because it has been a very windy spring. So having that flexibility now to go, right, if we've got to go into October, that's fine. We're still not getting complaints. The road's still suitable. Not spreading weed seeds and also priority weeds. So, the flexibility there. The grader drivers love it because they don't have to remove the vegetation off the side of the road anymore. You might go along where you see there's all these big piles of dirt and vegetation in the drain where they push it off just so they can actually grade the road back up to spec, and they don't have to bring in material because every time you grade with all that vegetation there, the roots hold a fair bit of material and it gets wasted. Without that they're saving costs there. So we reduced costs in chemical use too because now we're only spraying that one spring spray. Very rarely, if they grade a road, we may have to come back in and do a section again. But we're not going back a second and a third time as was shown earlier. In terms, we're able to do our major spring spray and gets us through right again to spring, where we'll start seeing some vegetation start showing itself, but by the time we go down again, like using a mixture of the multiple modes of action, as spoken about before, using different take misses, we're able to control that little vegetation, what is there, plus get the Esplanade down for the next 8 to 10 month control. So sorry, just another big one, is that part of my job is priority weeds. That's where the biosecurity really comes in. Vegetation's all management's just part of my job, but the priority weed control is a big part of it. And Esplanade's really allowed us to actually save so much time in our priority weed control, especially in relation to spiny burgrass, khaki weed, all these roadside weeds that are commonly spread by traffic, by users, by graders, because it's just dynamite, especially on these weeds, especially spiny burgrass. Sections of the Cobb Highway used to have probably 10, 15 k's of spiny burgrass just along it, and after every rain we would have to go back to those exact spots and spray it out. Otherwise, because it just grows so quickly, gets the seed head up there, and we've got to be very, very reactive. But now because it's so dynamite on that those grasses and that too, it's just what this spring spraying has actually gave us all that time back to spend on other high priority weeds. Using other products, but so getting more time back to spend on other tasks and that, just because we're not spraying 3 or 4 times a year, we're not buying 3 or 4 times the amount of chemical, we're getting less chemical into the environment. So all the slides you've seen earlier, even in trial situations, we've been able to put into a widespread real life application, and it's just works so well. I just can't speak highly enough of it, and I'm not even I'm just a user. Just found it, started using it, not paid. I got to still buy the stuff. So yeah.
And I'm not even allowed to give you bribes because you're a government worker. So there we go, guys.
Correct. I can't even receive a coffee over it. But sorry, I probably missed so much there, but there is. Like I said, even so, other departments now though, so I started off small scale about 4 or 5 years ago, just trialed it, and it's just gone we are wasting money and time and assets, even slashing now. So by not using it, because our slasher in the yard, we have not even. The slasher that they use on the roadsides hasn't moved for 3 years.
Hmm.
They just don't need to slash anymore because they've used that 3.5 metre width is just covering everything they need to get in there at the grader. You can see us to the bottom of that table drain. So the roads crew love it. My guys love it, you know, and it's just giving them more time to spend and go out there and educate the community on other weeds without worrying about just the shoulder vegetation. So,
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
That's great. Really appreciate your insights up in Moama and the Murray River Council. Very much appreciated.
Sorry, and also I'll just get in there. The gardening team had actually started spraying it in between their established garden beds around the Lamandras and the Happy Wanderers and trees. So anywhere that the plants are already established and we're not trying to grow something, but even if we were to plant something, time you dig the hole, it's actually good anyhow. So the intersections, the major intersections around traffic lights and that, you know, instead of being there every 6 weeks to spray, now we're back to like 1 or 2 sprays a year. So it's just a safety thing. It's just giving us more time to do other jobs too.
Fantastic. Thank you. Some great insights there from real life applications. So just quickly to wrap up from my perspective, why choose Esplanade? Long-lasting control, 8 to 12 months control in many cases, but we do have the guarantee of 6 months control at a minimum, and much lower use rates, only 150 mils per hectare. Fewer applications, as Tim just highlighted there, reducing operational costs and allowing you to get on and do some other jobs or to control broader areas of vegetation. Reduced environmental burden, only 75 grams of active ingredient applied per hectare versus kilograms or litres of some of the older chemistries that you might need to do to get lesser control. And minimise risk of runoff, low water solubility, and a really strong, high KOC, so strong soil binding properties of Esplanade. It will stay where you spray it. I often tell people that if you're seeing weeds coming through, in earlier than the 6 months, then it's probably where you've missed a spot and you didn't get full coverage of the bare ground, because Esplanade will stay where you spray it. I think there's only been a couple of questions and Kira's answered them in the chat. But please scan the QR code here, take you to our resource centre on our website where you can find a lot more information about Esplanade. And if you're in either Bannockburn, Brisbane or Wagga region, on the week of the 13th of October, we've got 3 in-person workshops. You might want to come along, learn a bit more about it. We've got a couple of different speakers presenting on Esplanade, on fire management and some new technologies in vegetation management space. So please have a look at those in-person events that we're having in a couple of weeks. And I'll just leave this slide here. If you'd like to contact anybody in my team, their contact details are on here. You can also find them in the contact us part of our website if you'd like some more contacts. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time today. And yeah, any questions, please reach out to the team. Otherwise, yeah, we'll call it an end there. Thanks very much, guys.